Hello, and thank you for joining me. I'm doing this video basically to preserve it for my use later on when I forget what I did. I also am providing it to you as a service as well to use in your creations, in particular space creations, because that's what we're going to deal with. Creating a space environment and for which to render out your uh, spaceships in Blender. This is very much a terrestrial uh, look at what Blender can do with HDRIs. Um, I couldn't, I could turn off the HDRI and just render out a model, but it wouldn't look the same. It wouldn't look like this. So I want to create this look when I'm putting together this environment for my models. Because it has more of a space feel. It has sharp shadows and deep shadows, and we have that contrast between the light and the dark that is very noticeable. And there really isn't much in the way of um, ambient lighting in space. So that's what we're trying to avoid. First of all, we're going to go out and find ourselves an HDRI image that we can use. This link will be in the description. Please, by all means, use it. As pointed out, it is usable in both personal and for commercial use. Free to use, by all means. If you do use it, consider buying him some coffee. I'm not sure who exactly this was that put this out here, but it's very nice, and it's a whole nice series of space environments. But we want one in particular. It's a white star with some other stars showing up and nebulae and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and grab that. We'll start by downloading that, and then of course my uh, advice is to move the HDRI from its download folder, put it someplace where more permanent. In this case, I'm just putting it on the desktop for this demonstration. So we'll move it over, a quick cut and paste process, and then we'll move on to actually using it and putting that environment into uh, Blender. In this case, it's 4.2.1, the latest LTS version. I recommend using it. It makes this sort of thing very, very easy. EEVEE has greatly improved with this version, and so I definitely encourage everyone to at least look at it, see if it's something that fits within your workflow. So in this case, this is just a generic. Uh, I haven't made any changes to this particular file, so it's just brand new, out of the box, minty fresh version. And so we're going to make a quick change to the default cube just to give it a little bit of interest. We're going to just extrude a couple pieces out of it so that when we look at it in that environment, we'll be able to see some details and things like that. So we'll go ahead and put like an indent here, and on the top we'll extrude something out. So it'll give us something for the shadows to grow on, and for us to actually get a good look at what we're doing here. So once all this is accomplished, we will go ahead and um, switch over to um, the quick and easiest way of setting this up is to go over to the shading tab. So here we are in the shading tab, um, and we're going to set up the world views, um, so that one will show you EEVEE and the other one will show you cycles, and we can do that by just clicking on the particular world and then opening up the vendor tab over there and making sure that we are using Cycles as our default render engine. And then we have, and with that, it will use um, the detailed world as a Cycles render. So here we go. We'll go ahead and switch this over to um, show rather than a different environment will show the scene world, which is what we're going to adjust to make it a space world. And again, we'll also turn off the lighting, that any lights that have been put in. This is the default, so it comes with one light. So we're not going to have that showing. So, and as we flip back and forth between the two, it looks pretty much the same at this point between EEVEE and Cycles. So what we'll need to do is switch over from the object view. We'll switch it over to the world view in this drop-down menu. We'll notice we're in the shader editor at this point. So we're going to change the world's shader. So we click on here, we select world, and by so doing, it gives us an opportunity to change it. Right now, the background is just gray, so we can make it whatever color we want, depending on what your feelings are, but this is what we're going to use to filter the color through of our HDRI. And you could just make it black. That's something that would provide you with a space environment. There wouldn't be any stars. There wouldn't be a set sun. You'd have to include those in scene lighting separately. We want something that's simple. So we're going to set this up. We're going to add 4 nodes. The first node is going to be the brightness and contrast node, which will allow us to dial in just how we want our world to look. You notice it just turned it white because that's the color that the contrast node provides out of the box. Then we're going to add into that, we're going to add our texture, our environment texture, which is what we're going to use to load in the HDRI. The color matches to the color in the brightness contrast. Notice it went pink. That's the default. Oops, there's a problem color. Right now there's a problem because the HDR is not loaded in there at this point. So let's go ahead and do that. Go to our desktop and we'll take a look at our HDR right there, load it in, and give it a few seconds and it'll load it in, and you'll see that it goes back to black, and you'll see a few stars in the background. We move around, you see the sun, there's a nebula there. All these things are present within that HDRI, so that's something that we can use in our environment if we wish. Usually my settings kind of wash those out and leaves me with a few of the brightest stars and the sun, which is, in my feeling, a little more like lifelike. So I'm going to pop up the background strength to about 11.5, 11.5, and we'll notice that everything is getting brighter, and that really doesn't look at all realistic to me. When you see pictures of space, you don't really see this. You see more of a black darkness. And so we're going to want to adjust that. But what it did do is it allowed us to see our objects. So at least at least we know we're in the right place. Notice the sun is off to the right. I'd like to go ahead and move it though. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to go ahead and add 2 more nodes. We're going to add from the input, we're going to be adding the texture coordinate node, and then we're also going to be adding a way to change the coordinates. So we're going to go into our vectors and we're going to add mapping that will allow us to actually change the coordinates so that we can move the sun around. And then we'll just connect them. Generated goes to the first vector input, and then the output from that, the vector output, goes down to the vector of our texture node, our environment texture node. So now everything's all connected up and I can start moving the sun around. That's just how easy that is to do that. You notice I'm now moving the sun on the Z axis. So I can put it wherever I want along those X, Y, and Z axes. Axis, axis, axis. I don't know. So anyway, um, So what we want to do now, though, is I kind of want to darken it up a bit, and I can do that by messing around with the brightness and the contrast. Um, let's zero these back out again. All right, so let's mess around um, a little bit. Let's move the sun where I kind of would like it to be, more into the front of the cube rather than off to the side. Now we see the shadows there. If I click into our cycles render, you can see we see basically the same thing. It looks a little bit better, in my opinion, but the two are very comparable. And if you have to use strictly just cycles, I'm sorry, EEVEE, then you're not really missing a whole lot. Um, so I kind of got it dialed in about where I want it. Let me move that down. There we go. So we've got some shadows on from the bottom and the side over there. Uh, Gives us a bit of an angle for the light rays to strike. Um, and so um, we'll make a setting change in EEVEE. So we switch over to EEVEE and we go down to ray tracing and click that on. Notice it darkens it up really nice, gives us some ambient occlusion in the edges there, really nice, uh, clean looking, um, and it's starting to bring it more into line with what I'd like to see. Then we're going to change over to the world setting, and this one's kind of hidden a little bit. It's in settings, and you want to make sure if it's not, if you click on settings and sun, it will bring up this checkbox for shadow. Make sure that's checked, or else you won't have any shadows. And if you don't see any shadows, this is why. So without it, the sun doesn't cast shadows. So there you go. Now the sun is casting its shadow. It's exactly what we want. Um, so we have this basic structure, and this is pretty much the setup. You can tweak the settings of brightness and contrast, um, and I usually will pump the contrast up to about 11.5 as well, um, and it gives that the really deep shadows on the dark sides and the really bright sides, kind of washed out colors and things on the lit side. So this is usually about where I keep it. Um, you can play with it, and I usually do when I'm actually setting up the scene. And this is the basic setting. And from this point forward, you can make about any change that you want to this setup. If you want to see more stars, pop up the brightness a little bit. It'll pop in more stars that way. Um, but yeah, there you go. Let me see. If I open up this and bring in a file, you may want to actually, if you want to save this for future use, best way is to go in and go to defaults. Let's make sure everything's right where we want it here. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and go back and then make some changes. Go back over to if you save the default now, what it'll do is it'll save everything, the default cube changes you've made and everything. So if I were to close and open it back up again, everything would be there, including the default cube, the way that you see it now. Um, but instead, let's just go ahead and delete that and go ahead and add a simple cube back in again, so that every time you open it, you get the ubiquitous default cube. And now we'll go ahead and save it again. You know, yeah, go ahead. Actually, there were some other pieces, but if I go ahead and close it now, I don't even have to save this particular thing. If I go back in to Blender and open that up again, we will see that everything is still set up the way that it was. See the cubes there. If I go into shading right here, um, well, it's still open there. So let's go ahead and change that back too. So you notice the world, the changes that we made to the world environment are still there. All of that is there. The settings we made here. Let's change that back to cycles. Um, and then we'll go ahead and change the world back to object. And then we'll go ahead and go back to layout and do another save on this. And that should have put everything back the way that it was, without you going in and actually saying go back to defaults, because that would wipe out everything that you changed to the environment as well. So um, no, we don't need to change this. Let's go look at something a little more complicated to see how this really does work in a more finished process. So this is the actual spaceship that we've seen or saw at the beginning of the video. Right now it's an EEVEE, um, and let me switch it over to Cycles preview here, and it'll take a few minutes for it to render out. We'll take it all the way out to the 1024 um, samples, and it'll take a few minutes, and then we'll do a quick comparison between that and what um, EEVEE gives you with these same settings without changing any settings at all, other than switching over to the EEVEE preview, the viewport preview. Um, we'll see that it is remarkably close. It's not perfect as far as the finish and polish of it, but my goodness, it's faster in rendering. So um, absolutely, it makes it worthwhile using it for pre-production type renderings, just to make sure that everything is in the right place and so forth, and you're not wasting this much time on actually doing a full render on it. So here is Cycles, and there's EEVEE. So between those two, just uh, the difference is not worth even talking about. So very, very nice. And I hope that you enjoyed the video, and hope you get use out of the process. Thank you.